Hello, my name is George Kobar, and I'm a community member with the Elastic community team. And what we're going to be talking about today is a journey through the Elastic SIEM. And it's a three-part series that myself, Cami, and Rob have put together that will walk you through getting started all the way through a journey of threat hunting. And, one thing that we wanted to do is, for this particular presentation, as a virtual meetup style, it's going to be very laid back, informal. So if you have questions, by all means, answer questions in chat, and we'll have some time at the end of this to really go through it. But let me go through some introductions here. So Cami, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cami Lewis. I'm a community advocate here at Elastic, focused on security. I'm based in Colorado, and I've been with Elastic for about 18 months. And then we have Rob.
Thanks, Cami. Hi, I'm Rob Waite. I'm a support engineer with Elastic, and I've also been with Elastic for about 18 months.
Yeah, and again, my name is George Kobar. I'm a community advocate for Elastic, and I'm based here in Colorado. I've been in Elastic for about 3 years. And yeah, we're both all three of us are very excited to be here and helping kind of get this conversation and get this presentation started. So, yeah, let's go over, just give me 1 second here. So in today's virtual meetup, we're going to be talking about Elastic Security, specifically SIEM. And this is, again, a three-part series, starting on how we can get started all the way through threat hunting. But before we do, I want to talk to the fundamentals behind what Elastic SIEM is. So the Elastic Stack, or what some of you have been heard is the ELK Stack, and it's the open source technical foundation that was created by Elastic. And there's four main components within the stack, which are kind of the ingestion layer, which we call Beats and Logstash. And Beats is a lightweight data shipper, and Logstash is a pipeline processing piece, and that's what provides the ingestion of data into Elasticsearch. And Elasticsearch is a RESTful search engine that acts also as just the analytics engine, but also as the data store. And that's really the search behind the entire stack. And Kibana is the virtualization layer, or to visualize the data. So any of the data that you've ingested into Elasticsearch, specifically documents, logs, metrics, security information, a lot of these different pieces into Elasticsearch, then you can visualize it using dashboards within Kibana. And specifically, we're also using Kibana as of late to also manage the stack. And on top of this stack, and again, the ELK stack or the Elastic Stack is open source. So by open source, it's something that you can open and see the code, contribute to it, use it for your own solutions. And it's surprisingly how many other people and or companies, organizations are using the open source solution as not only as a part of their own product or as a solution. But Elastic, what we're also doing here is deploying solutions, specifically enterprise search, Elastic observability, and of course, Elastic security. And these are just some of the use cases that people use the Elastic Stack for. Specifically, these solutions, however, are turnkey solutions that Elastic has developed that will give you the ability to not create this by yourself, or with a group, create it from scratch. So a lot of these solutions are turnkey and kind of give you into these use cases a lot faster. And there's a lot of different ways on how you deploy this Elastic Stack. Piece is obviously on bare metal or on containers, or using, for example, our open source Kubernetes operator that was just written here in the last year. Those are some options that are available to you. And one of the things that we'll be showing today is our Elastic Cloud. So it's something where if you want to manage if you want to have someone else manage the Elastic Stack, you could use our service to do so. So one of the things we'll be talking about specifically with our solution is that it's free and it's open. And everything that we will be talking about today, with the exception of the Elastic Cloud, our SaaS offering is free and open. So that's something I want to stress about kind of this presentation. And that's mainly because I'm lazy and I want to really talk more about the solution, the free and open SIEM, than I do necessarily on the stack side. One thing that we'll talk about here specifically with the the Elastic security, especially the SIEM. Elastic is on a mission to help people and organizations improve upon their security awareness. So there's been a widespread of adoption with the Elastic Stack for threat hunting. So this isn't something that Elastic is new at, or this is a new use case. A lot of people have been using this solution for security for a long time, but they've also been using it for threat hunting, fraud detection, security monitoring, and this is across many different communities, especially in the security community. So the intention of this virtual meetup is really to help spread awareness, make it easier for users to deploy the products for security. It's something that we released back in 2019. And one of the things that we also are helping in collaboration is this, what's called Elastic Common Schema. And really this is a framework or a common naming schema where you can take data from many different data sources and allow it to have it unified for you to use and consume. So if I'm taking security data, for example, logs and metrics, or if I'm taking data from audit information, it's going to be unified. So then if I'm looking at dashboards, I don't have a different data modeling for each different data set. It's a common schema that we can use that for. So that's one of the things that we talk about today is we're using all this open source and free. And when I mean free, it is free. And I know it's a loaded term. Yes, you probably still have to pay for the infrastructure, the laptop you're running it on, or the bare metal server, the power. You obviously have to have people maybe that manage it. But in terms of the software, yes, it's free to use our Elastic SIEM and the Elastic Stack. It's not something that you pay for, or you pay us to use. And that's something that's traditionally not what we see within the security community. And Rob is, we'll talk to Rob in just a few moments about that, but I think that's actually a huge deal, especially within products that are traditionally closed and paid. Rob did a great job, and this is kind of the reason why we're doing this virtual meetup presentations is kind of based off of what Rob wrote in his blogs. So he's written several blogs that walk you through on how to do this step by step, getting started, getting it configured, all the way into threat hunting. So Rob, what I wanted to do, I'm going to stop sharing for right now. And what I wanted to do is talk to Rob real quick about kind of what are your motivations into why did you write this blog series on our website?
Sure. I think, well, I mean, it's maybe a bit more of a loaded question than that, but so I've been interested in security for a long time, and then a lot of it's like as my kids grow up, I want to be able to learn what's happening at home. For example, the internet can be a dangerous place, right? For one thing, but two, I have my family has a small business, and I have friends with a small business. Anyway, so I think about that, and I think about how like folks that aren't necessarily technical, how security can be really mysterious to them. But I also think about budgets, and I think about no one's going to spend $50,000 on a security product or at home 3 or 4 computers, right? It doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to do it for home. It doesn't make sense to do it for business. And prior to coming to Elastic, there was a lot of like, oh hey, a lot of people use the Elk stack for things like logging, and I'm not going to take the time to look through thousands of logs on my computer. It doesn't make sense. And so when they released, when 7.2 came out, when the beta of SIEM came out, I started to dig through it. I actually went through and I put a Pi-hole on at home, and I found 200,000 DNS requests in 24 hours on my home network, and I was a bit surprised. And I was like, oh, okay. And and so kind of the timing kind of worked out well. So then I was like, you know what, I want to throw this into Elastic SIEM. I kind of want to try this out. And I had reached out to the community team or I guess the marketing team or whatever, and I said, hey, I'm interested in writing a blog about SIEM at home. And was, encouraged to do it. And basically it's, it's interesting to me. It's interesting, hopefully it's interesting to others. And if I help a few folks figure out how to get it set up, then I've done more than I was hoping to do. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things, even though maybe a lot of small, medium businesses today aren't necessarily thinking about security solutions, given the pandemic and maybe trying to keep their business running. But this is very important, I think, because, let's say when we return to normal, or if it gives people the opportunity to say, hey, I was budgeted for a security product, but now, I can't. And they're still interested in implementing this within their own business, or even for personal use. Because I think, as you'll see when we start to demo this, if you just want to have, a solution to run it, we think it's very feasible in terms of the cost to run it in our cloud. But I think providing this option for people to use it and consume it, I think is huge. Even for you to dive in and get some more data around, or information around, what's going on within your own environment. So Rob, I know kind of during this, between myself, Cami, and Rob, we were all kind of talking about and planning for this. One thing that Rob really brought up that was pretty cool is going through this process of writing the blogs and doing the demonstration, the demo, and as we're going along, I think you found a couple curious things that was going on with your own environment. Is that something that you can share?
Sure. Do you want me to share my screen on this one now, or do you want me to just talk through it and then we'll go through it later?
I mean, we could let's take a look at the screen, if that's okay, and then
sure.
Kinda...
So as I went through this, I did find out some interesting things. One of them, namely, was I have a device at home that was, I don't know if you guys can see this now, but I have a device at home that was actually in partnership with all the DNS requests. It was reaching out to Taiwan to check for updates. I didn't know that's where the vendor was based out of. I didn't realize that's where they push their updates from, if you will. They have offices in other places, but anyway, so it's interesting to find out that down in Taiwan, this device was, I guess it won't let me zoom in. That's cool. Anyway, Zoom won't let me zoom in, but that's fine. Anyway, so in Taiwan, so I was able to see this on the map, and I was like, oh, okay, that was kind of fascinating. And then that was the only country in Asia Pacific that was showing up yesterday when I was looking at this. And I was telling Kobar before we started the meetup, my kids have been home from school, of course, and they were looking up some gaming stuff yesterday. And apparently we've got, Korea and Singapore and a few other places on there. So that's something I might look up later. But it's nice that I have a nice view of all my systems. Again, I would never take the time to look at this, but as I have time to look through it, I have a handful of boxes on here, but this is data from my home network, and I can aggregate it all at once. I will say, though, if you mentioned hosting on the cloud, the reason I put it in the Elasticsearch service, one was kind of to be lazy, but two, I have so like my mom lives out of town, and I always get calls on some random, hey, this and this doesn't work, right? So I could just put beats on her computer, and now when I get that phone call, I can just say, hang on, let me go look and see what events are in here, right? And so part of it was I wouldn't go through the trouble to set up a VPN for her. However, without that, now I can have her just ship it to the Elasticsearch service, and I can kind of troubleshoot her system from there. So
yeah, and it's funny because when Rob was showing that, we're kind of planning what we're going to demo, what we're going to show for this virtual meetup, or the first part one. It was like, oh yeah, hey, I have this device that was calling out to Taiwan, and yeah, and like what you said, Rob, is yeah, you just didn't know, and not that it was malicious or anything that that there was any ill intent there, right? I mean, I think you found a setting within your NAS that was calling out, what was it, every 5 seconds or for a update?
Yeah, it was like some default timer was to check, do a DNS request, and then yeah, every 5 seconds I was looking for updates, which it was like I said, it wasn't malicious, but it was something that I had and looked at the defaults and changed. So
yeah, and that's just some of the visibility that I think is very powerful when you start to visualize some of your data, right? I mean, I know there's a lot of talks around, visualizing data through COVID or visualizing data through logs and metrics. And I mean, there's a lot of different pieces. I think just the visualization of that is, I'm sure you could do it manually, right? You can go through, thousands of lines of logs, right? Who has the time for that? And then to find the IP address of that's something that's unique, and then doing the who has, and then figuring out, oh, okay, that's that company from here. When you can actually just take a quick look at a map and see all of that data, and then start to do some investigations on that. So I think that's really cool. So one of the things that,
there's a question, George, real quick from the chat that I think is really pertinent to this. So Mike W is asking, what are the requirements for a home SIEM? So
yeah,
I
so
want to see if we can touch on that real quick.
yeah, so basically what, so if you were going to run this just exclusively at home, so we're looking kind of for the free open source, and you were going to run this, let's say on an Intel NUC, or maybe you have a larger server you can virtualize, this, I would say for a SIEM, and this is just kind of a very high level, because it really depends on how many devices you're monitoring and so forth. For personal use, I would say probably a 4 gigs for Elasticsearch, 2 gigs for Kibana, and then basically, there's a lot of different ways on how you can, how many cores you should have, or probably a minimum of 4 cores, I'd say. And again, it's funny because I think Rob, him and Rob, actually Rob and I both come from support. I know Rob's still supporting a lot of our Elastic folks. And then I came from support. So I can probably tell if I give some numbers right now, it could be a little cringy or cringeworthy, just because you could probably run it with a lot less CPU and memory. I'm just looking at a pretty good baseline to kind of get started, and you can scale up or scale down. But you'll see as we go through, one of the things that I'm doing locally here is I'm using a hypervisor. So I have like a Dell R710, it's showing its age. And I have a couple of virtual machines that I use for this demo. And I'm installing lightweight agents that are collecting that data and then sending it into Elasticsearch that happens to be on our SaaS offering. And that's kind of what I'm doing. But to instantiate like Elasticsearch, Kibana, would be and then the beats, you're probably looking for a minimum type of hardware sizing. I mean, Rob, do you want to chime in there too?
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Awesome, that's perfect. So as far as hardware, I mean, there's not necessarily restrictions. It's just more for what works best for performance. So from a support perspective, if you're going to log a lot of data, you'd want to use an SSD. You wouldn't want to use a spinning disk, right? So it really depends on your use case. Like for this home and small business, I actually have 2 more blogs planned. One's going to kind of go through more about maps, and I'll show that in a little bit. And then another was going to be a little bit more about maintenance. So like as a home user, I don't need more than a couple days actually. Just one, it's cost effective, and 2, it's nothing I want to really hang on to. So I can really, scale down how much disk usage I have, and I could put a small SSD on it if I was hosting it at home. Or if an Elasticsearch service, obviously I could, scale it down to just delete the data after 7 days or something like that. So it really depends on where you want to go with it. So, and that's the beauty of it, is we're not necessarily restricted to one thing or another. And on that note, from a support side, we do have like tuning guides, if it's tuned for search speed or index speed or disk usage, and that stuff's available out there. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we have clusters that are in our SaaS offering that's 1 gig or 2 gig in CPU and 1 or 2 virtual CPUs. So I mean, again, I would just so during this demo, it's a very a quick 20-minute kind of demo of installing, and then I'll show the actual results of me installing all this, and then kind of go through some what we have on our Elastic Cloud, to give you a little better idea of what it is. But I think that's the point, is I think if you do like just to install and try it out, you can start small and always vertically scale up in terms of CPU and memory if you have that ability. So let's see. Is there let's see. I know, Rob, the other question I wanted to ask you was, so you learned a lot, not only just with your own environment and seeing kind of what things, maybe your kids are looking at in terms of like, what sites and so forth, just from Pi-hole. But is there something else that you kind of learned during this process that?
So like some of the order of the blogs, for example, I was going to kind of make the secure, like blogs 2 and 3 are about configuring. Blog 2 is about like setting up a new user for Beats to write data and making a user account for yourself. So So basically, super user isn't stored in your beats configurations. And then also that when you sign into the cluster, you're not also signed into super user all the time. So things like, it's not the best security practice, but it's a good baseline, right? And that was something where, okay, like I mentioned, my mom having, looking at her system. Well, I give her a user account, she can go look up. She probably won't, but if she asks, I have a role and everything ready to go, kind of thing. But the thing is, like, my kids, well, I'll be proud of them if they get nosy and they figure out this program's running, with some YAML file, right? If they go and find the password, which they could, that account has no access to anything. So it's again, it's not the best solution. Like, I wouldn't, in production, I wouldn't run everything as root or admin like we are. But again, that was more just kind of getting us started. And then the other thing was, I found going through it was configuring beats across 5 systems and 3 applications, 15 files, can get really maddening if you make multiple changes. So blog 3 was really about look at your beats configuration before you deploy them, because otherwise, if you have to go back and update 15 files because you forgot, to put your latitude and longitude or something, you'll find it to be frustrating. So, and I'd recommend like Ansible or something like that to use, but I'm not very familiar with those, so I left it out. But
yeah, and that's something we can always lurk on a little later into the blog series is maybe helping with the automation. Now Rob is we'll go and grab this link to a lot of the configurations we'll be going over today, and especially the blogs will point to his GitHub. So if you need configuration examples or everything through this whole demo and this either through reading through the blogs or going through this virtual meetup, then that's available there too. So. Hey, Cami, did you have any questions? I know I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, there's one other question about maps. I think we'll cover that during the maps portion.
Perfect. Okay.
We're good.
Well, yeah. So one little thing I'll do right now, and it's funny because since everyone's working from home or we're doing virtual learning, my internets can be challenging at times. So what I did was I did record a video and I'll speak over it just to kind of go over how to get started with this, and we'll kind of go through some basic configurations, and then I'll kind of switch back to live and show you the actual dashboard of what we got. And if you have questions during that time, definitely answer it, and we can always pause the video or continue forward. And then kind of once I'm done with this just showing the video and then me personally talking over it, Cami will also show kind of what we're hoping to accomplish by the end of this webinar series, by the part 3. She'll basically go over a very high level of, hey, now that you've kind of spent this journey with us, going over 3 different virtual meetups, this is hopefully what we'll be able to accomplish, and then you'll be able to use. So for the more senior or veteran security folks, they'll be able to help, see, okay, these are, this is something that's that I could use and something that'll be functional. So let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me just grab this video here real quick.
And hey, one thing to mention, if you haven't gone through this, the blogs are designed where one is just kind of getting the deployment created in Elasticsearch service. And again, you can make the cluster, you can set up at home, you just change the outputs. 2 and 3, again, 2 is more of a get set up, so some security baselines, and then 3 was getting your GeoIP set up and your beats configs, and then 4, 5, and 6 are individual getting beats installed on your different systems, and then 7 was kind of the, hey, we've gone through all this work and here's kind of what we have. So if you haven't gone through the blogs and you have questions, just let us know.
Yeah, and we'll one of the things on that. We'll go through the kind of like the recorded demo here, and if any questions, Cami or Rob, if you want to interrupt or so forth, I'll be kind of talking to the video as it's going through. But yeah, let me know. We can always stop it. And one thing, it's funny because when I did this, the purpose of this particular demo was really focused on how to get up kind of going as quickly as possible, just so you can start evaluating this. So you'll start to laugh right away when you start to see, hey, I'm installing this as root. It's like, come on, and I totally understand that. I get that. So if everyone wants to put like grief in the chat for that, I totally understand. But one of the things is I just want to show more about getting started, and then we'll actually use the second blog series to do security hardening, and then go through and enrich the data even more and kind of continue that process. So yeah, so it's demo time. Can everyone see the screen?
We can see it, George.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to rewind this just a teeny bit. Thank you for that. So yeah, it's demo time. So one of the things that we're going to help accomplish today is I have these two virtual machines that happens to be on my Dell R710, and they have a lot of different beats that are installed with it. And the purpose of this, if there's some type of issue or something that's being recognized through the beats, it'll be sent over to Elastic. All this data will be sent to Elasticsearch and then Kibana, and then we'll be able to visualize that data. I'm going to rewind it for just a second. So we'll be able to visualize that data. And then of course, through some of the machine learning or automated methods to do this, there's also kind of some alerting that we're gonna be building in a little later on. But the purpose of this is really to start getting audit information, log messages, a network packet information, all this data into Elasticsearch, and then be able to visualize that. So one of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a cloud instance. And the reason why I'm creating the cloud instances is because I'm just doing a shortcut to stand up the Elastic stack. So for example, the Kibana and Elasticsearch. And that's one of those things that's obviously not free, but it's just something that we're using as a shortcut to kind of get started. So we do a 14-day free trial, and it's at that link. And it's something that, if you want to copy that down, great. Of course, I'm like missing it. Right there. If you want to copy that link down, if not, you can just go to cloud.elastic.co, and it'll actually have the, would you like to try that out? So anyway, so basically it'll send you an email, and the email will be to start the free trial or do an acknowledgement, verify and accept. And once you do that, it's going to prompt you to go and set up a password. And this password for me, I'm going to go ahead and do it, a little more complex, and hopefully I remember it later. And again, it's a 14-day trial, so it's something that doesn't require a credit card or anything, something you can, I'm gonna go ahead and select to start the free trial here. And then one of the things I'm gonna call this is SIEM. Now, our Elastic Cloud, again, this is not really the focus, but it's something you can either deploy on Amazon, Google, or Azure. And I'm just, since I'm based in Denver, I'm gonna select Oregon, so that's the closest to me. And then the latest right now is 7.6.2. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just customize my deployment. And one of the things, if you do the trial, you won't be able to see too many different options in terms of, you can be able to move up or move down how much memory you have in the cluster. That's just because we want to give you, a trial version and keep our costs associated with that. But here, this is kind of my environment, so that's why I'm going through. You can obviously adjust how many zones you have, how much memory is allocated to Elastic. Right now I have like a gig to Kibana. We have also what's called machine learning. That's also part of this, that's included. So I'm gonna go ahead and create deployment. Now, once the deployment's been created, you'll see where you can, the username is just Elastic, and this is the password. So what you can do is you can just hit copy that password or download, because that's what we're going to be using in a lot of our beats configuration. We'll need to set a URL of the Elastic instance and also the password. And I just downloaded it just because I had a copy of that here locally to the machine here. And if you're wondering, yes, I already changed the password, so at least I'm that security conscious today. So I went ahead and download that or copy that. And I think once we're ready here, we're gonna go ahead and launch Kibana. And of course, a part of this, well, now I'm copying it. Once we launch Kibana, it's gonna ask us for that username or password. And for whatever reason, if I forget about this, you could easily go on the left-hand side, and you'll see where there's a security side. And you'll be able to reset the password. So, if for whatever reason you forgot to do it, that's no problem. You can copy that, and I'm just resetting it here just to kind of give you an example. But if we come back to Kibana, we'll go ahead and hit launch here. And we'll go ahead and log in with Elastic. And then that password that I just copied, I'll go ahead and paste. And one of the first things that you'll be presented with is, hey, would you like to use some of the data that's already present, or would you like to add your own? Like if you want to try the sample data. Obviously, we're going to explore our own because we're going to be ingesting data into Elasticsearch. And then from here is a good page or launch page of how we can start adding data. So I went to the SIEM part. I want to start adding a SIEM, and this is just great information about what integrations that we currently have. So one thing we'll do is we'll start, because I'm RDP'd, this video is just for an RDP session into this Windows 10 machine, just on evaluation. But what I'm gonna do is I can start to install WinLogB. And before I do the installation here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create what's called the GeoIP pipeline. So when we configure this ingest pipeline, a lot of the data that you saw within Rob's environment was specifically putting some longitude and latitude. What we're doing is we're creating this ingestion pipeline to get information here of want to be able, when we're ingesting, we want to recognize the field of the client IP, of the source and destination, and the server IP address and the host IP address. These are all different fields that additionally we want to add into our Elasticsearch cluster. And these are one of the things that that you can do, and it's within the blog and or within that example. So you can go into, which is called Dev Tools, which is kind of a way that you can edit the Elasticsearch without sending, let's say, Postman API curls. You can go directly into this Kibana, which is called Dev Tools, and then we'll be pasting this description, or pasting this right here. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just going over on the left-hand side, and I'm pressing enter a couple times, and then I'm pasting actually, I have this already pre-copied on Sublime Text. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this GeoIP pipeline, and I'm going to go ahead and be pasting it here, and then we'll go ahead and be running it. And it will provide a little more details within the virtual, or the second virtual meetup, about enriching this data or why we're doing this. But we see that we got to acknowledge is true here.
And regarding the question with maps, so if you're self-hosting, you can actually build your own database with MaxMind, and they have their own blog about it. So if you're self-hosting and you want to, kind of customize where your locations are, you can definitely do that either with Elasticsearch or Logstash. And then the other thing was in blog 3 is where you add this ingest pipeline, but then in each beat you have to tell the beat to use that Elasticsearch ingest pipeline in the configuration. And so that's critical. And then there's another part to make sure you're on 7.6 or newer, because there was a fix for IPs in an array that lets that work together. So hopefully all those are in the blog, but again, with that information, that's what lets you see this information on the map.
Yeah, perfect, thanks. So now that I've added that additional piece there, I'm gonna go ahead and start installing these lightweight agents, which are called beats. So I'm gonna go ahead and add these events, and then one of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna install Windows Event Log. And if I select into that, what the nice thing about this is it gives us step-by-step instructions on how to install this. So for example, I'm gonna come over here to hit the download page, and this gives me a zip file that I'm gonna do. I think you can also do an MSI, and that's a part of beta, so that's something that you also do. But I just downloaded it, and what now I'm gonna do is, in the instructions, it tells me to rename that file. So I'm gonna go ahead and come over back to my downloads, and I'm gonna rename it just to WinLogB. And that makes it a little easier, because when I'm going through PowerShell, then I'm not trying to enter in the entire string of the version. So I'm gonna go ahead and extract that out. And then, then I'm gonna go ahead and rename this here. And what's nice is, there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of installing this. And I mean, there's a lot of different methods on how to do this from an automated standpoint, but I really want to show from getting started on how to kind of go through this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up PowerShell, run as administrator. So we have the access. And again, one of those security things, I'm going to set the execution policy to be unrestricted, just so that we can kind of go through and install this. Again, don't judge. This is just kind of a brief, getting started. But yeah, that's what we're going to do here is we're going to set the execution policy just so we can allow that. Now, one thing I think in the blog series, Rob, you also mentioned specifically, I think it's in blog 3, you can set the policy to, was it restricted?
It should be remote signed.
Yeah, remote
should
sign,
allow you to, because the code is signed. But I know some folks will go straight to unrestricted, but.
Yeah, and hopefully, I think the text is coming up pretty clearly. I really didn't investigate too much in increasing the font size in the PowerShell, so I'll kind of talk about it. But what I'm doing is I'm saying to allow run, and then I'm now changing directories into that program files. That's where I exported that to. And then what I'm doing now is I'm installing that script to install it, and it says, "Hey, would you like to run once?" And I say yes. So we're installing this WinLog beat here. And what's great about this is if you kind of notice down below when it says the edit the configuration, as soon as I go back to the Kibana piece, you'll see that, hey, this is where I could provide you the cloud ID. This is my cloud instance right now, and also the cloud auth. So it's giving you the elastic and then the password. But what I'm going to do is I need to configure my WinLogbeat, the YAML file, to be able to connect into the cloud instance that we just created. So I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up this YAML file within Sublime. One thing, or whatever text editor you want. One thing that you can also do, there's a reference.yaml file, and then the reference will tell you a lot of other different configurations you can do there. So that's something you can, take a look and get a more idea of what's available. Now, what I've done is I've copied the cloud ID and the cloud auth, and I'm just going to copy the password. That's that same password I grabbed from when the cluster was created. And I'm going to go ahead and enter that password. And very briefly, I'm not going to go through all the configuration options within the YAML file. That just because obviously we want to be able to kind of enrich the data later on. One of the things, though, you'll see here we have, we're picking up event logs. And one thing to call out is I have SysMon or sys internals that aren't installed. So I did a pre-install of that on Windows. In the blog that Rob wrote, he kind of walks about that. I think it's on the third one or fourth one. About how to install that, because you'll notice here, I go back just a teeny bit, that it's using that SysMon internals part of that. That's to grab some of that data. And that's just for the WinLog beat specifically. But you notice here, you have some basic Elasticsearch settings. I mean, really anything else, we're going to keep the default. The only thing that we're going to add or to enrich the data is some of that geo IP information. So down over here, we'll eventually get to a place where it says processors, and the processors is where we can add, for example, host metadata into it. So one of the things that I did is I went to a website, I looked up my longitude, latitude based on my address, my house address, and then what I did is I kind of filled in the location by latitude and longitude, the address, the region name. So I live in Colorado. My city is in Arvada. And this isn't really my house. It's pretty close to it. So, but anyway, this is additional information that we're enriching and providing that data into Elasticsearch. So now what we're basically doing is we're adding fields to say, this is my geolocation, this is the longitude, latitude for what we're calling home or home base or where this is installed at. So we're enriching some of this data here. And this is some of the configuration that we're going to add to the WinLogbeat configuration to give some more information on it. And of course, so.
And hey, on that note, so if you travel, I would recommend you defining your home subnets, and you can do extra entries for the add fields, and that way you could define your local private subnet as that location. And then if you're if you traveled and you're on a different private subnet, it won't write that you're at home when you're not at home, and it's all tunable to however you want to set it up. So
yeah, that's great. And then just make sure the formatting's correct. I think when I pasted it from that file, it moves the net info over, so I just kind of went ahead and created that. And once I'm good there, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And there's, again, there's logging information. If you want to have it, this being monitored by other solutions, that's something else that that could be done here. You know, I'm really not going too much into detail of like all the options. The next part, we'll go into a little bit more detail. As soon as we have some data moving into Elastic and then stuff for us to visualize, then we'll start to build based off of that. Oh, and the one thing that I didn't add, and actually I think I'm going back to doing, is tags. So one of the things you could do, and it's under the general section, is you can start to name these different systems that are coming from. So we can identify it quickly from Elastic or Elasticsearch. So for example, this tag, we're calling it name. You know, since this name is a Windows system, it's the only Windows system that I have within this demo. So I'm just going to call it, I think it's Windows and then capital system. And then the one thing that you could start also doing is adding additional fields like, you know, or the tags like, is this, let's say this was in production within your organization. Maybe you want to add this one log beat to say, this is our web tier, or this is our back end, or this is, you know, this type of service. Then you can start adding, like, for example, a tag. I'm calling this VM1. And, you know, notice it gives you an example. This could be, you know, you can give it multiple tags as a part of like data center, whatever, you know, and service, you know, whatever, in quotes. So you can start adding additional tags to that. So when you start looking and visualize this data in Kibana, you can look for tags to do that to help you out. Now, one of the things too, we might also want to name this as environment. And this is all really arbitrary. You can really name it whatever you want. But env environment, this is, you know, listed as staging. I'm just going to say this is for home. This is, you know, kind of what environment I'm looking at. And it's funny, I didn't edit out any mistakes because, you know, what's the fun with everything going right? So you'll see in just a second here, I have to uncomment the fields. So I go and I start, I attempt to do a startup here or setup WinLogBean, and it errors out. Maybe I should have spoiled it. I said spoil alerts. But what I'm doing here when I set up the WinLogBean and setup is what I'm going through the setup configuration. And one of the options is to upload the dashboard. So as part of every beat, there's some preloaded dashboards that are automatically loaded to Kibana, which really helps out significantly when you're starting to visualize that. So yeah, I got an error message in line 62 that something's going wrong, and up there it is 62. I just need to comment out fields that's under part of that, and then I'll save that, and we'll see if it works. Okay, and yep, and it's set up, and you'll see that it's something that's called ILM, which is Index Lifecycle Management, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on the series too. And I'm gonna go ahead and start WinLogBean. And once I've started it, I can come back to the configuration page, and I can do check data. Is data actually arriving into Kibana, which is actually gives you that final verification that did I do everything correctly, this 4-step process. Now, what I did is I just showed over Windows. What I wanted to show just quickly was another beat that's over CentOS. And this process will be a lot quicker just because I don't have to go and edit files and you know, export and so forth. I'm just going to pull it directly down. So what I'm doing is I'm just logging in to my I'm using CentOS 8, and again it's another virtual machine. And what I'm going to do here is I'm logging as root. Again, you can berate me on chat if you want. But I'm going to go through that same process, but I did, instead of going through Windows, I'm going to go through Linux. And of course, you know, you'll find that if we go through here, you can do Mac OS, Debian, so, you know, Ubuntu, RPM, so Red Hat as well. What I did is I literally just hit copy that snippet, and now I'm bringing that down through curl. And then I'm going to use the RPM to install the audit-b package. And then now I'm going over and I'm copying that snippet. That's going to be the cloud ID. And then the Elastic username, I just got to take that password and paste it here. So not necessarily a conversation for this meetup, but I'm using Vi instead of Emacs. And I'm going to go ahead and edit that. And very similar to what we were doing within the Sublime text editor, what I'm doing is I'm just copying and pasting that cloud ID information. And then I'm gonna go back to that copy password I have that I've already changed, so don't try it. And I'm going and remove out that password and put in the actual password. And again, one of the things that we'll want to do is, this is for audit information into the machine. So if there's any, what I did is I asked a couple of friends and colleagues if they could, try to get into this machine or log in. So obviously this is recording audit information on CentOS. And what I'm doing right here is I'm actually going back to enriching this data again with some more geo IP information. So I'm copying that same information, my longitude, latitude, my location, and I'm adding it to the host metadata field. So I'm adding that here.
And kind of on that, so in the blogs with blog 3, we set up the beats common configurations, and it's basically the general settings, the host name, and any tags at the top level, any the top level processors like the geo IP information, your output to Elastic Cloud, or if you're running it at home, Elasticsearch or even Logstash, and then any logging settings or monitoring or whatever. Anyway, all of those settings carry across Windows, Mac, and Linux, so they're agnostic to any operating system. And then what I did is in GitHub, there's a beats common config YAML, and you basically drop that at the bottom or top of the specific applications configuration file. And in the blogs, that I basically put the full configuration file for each application in the blog as well. But if you want to make your own, I recommend making a common one that you agree upon for each system. And then that way you can drop it into each application's config file as you go through with the installation. It will just save you some heartburn from having to go back and update them again and again.
Yeah, and here what we did was just took a snippet of, we're running this setup. That's a nice little check that everything is okay within the YAML file. And then what it's doing is it's actually downloading, I'm gonna pause this for a second. It's downloading or uploading the dashboards that are kind of pre-made with AuditBeat, and it's sending that to Kibana. So when we launch Kibana, we'll see some of those dashboards that are pre-made, which is kind of half of the work too. Getting the data into Elasticsearch, making sure that you got that data set up, and then ensuring that it's coming through, and then visualizing that data, which we kind of see the power of that. So, and again, one of the things I did within CentOS is, you'll see that in just a second here. This is just kind of a quick list of the things that we're showing within cloud, of all the different integrations that we have. And it's not just limited to this. I know 7.7 is on the horizon here, and they're the Tanya, she's the product manager, is mentioning how many. I mean, there's hundreds of different integrations that are out there, and this is just kind of some of the common ones that we threw up on our Kibana, on our so you can easily quickly get going. There's a lot of custom endpoints that you can create. There's a lot of different modules for ASA, Cisco, Juniper, to name some vendors, right? But there's a lot of different of these configurations or integration points that you can utilize. So, and again, this is something I installed, system metrics and so forth. So one thing I want to do, because I know we're running just a little over on time, the process for installing the other beats within CentOS is very similar. We showed. There might be some other pieces specifically for Windows. Like for example, there's a module or a beat called Packet Beat. It's something you have to install WinPCAP, or what was the Rob? I know you installed.
It's NPCAP. Yeah, I think WinPCAP has some vulnerabilities and is deprecated. So NPCAP is what's in that blog. Yeah, that's the one that I use on Windows.
Yeah, and that's something that you can add, that, but that's included within the blog to kind of walk you through that. So I didn't want to go through every single beat and what I installed here, but this kind of gives you a snapshot of what I did, right? So we have our CentOS machine and our Windows machine. And Windows, we installed WinLog Beat, Packet Beat, Audit Beat, and Metric Beat together, all this data, and send it into our Elasticsearch host that happens to be residing in Elastic Cloud. So if this could be self-hosted, this is something you could run as a Docker container, or on bare metal, or on a virtual machine, entirely up to you. We just use that just to kind of shortcut to get the cluster up and going. And then on CentOS machine, what we did is we installed FileBeat, packet beat, audit beat, and metric beat. And those are just some of those pieces there for that. And one of the things, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to show you the actual, I'm going to actually show you the environment that we're using, that I installed everything on. And we'll take just a quick look at the SIEM UI. And then we'll have Tammy, or excuse me, Cami. Cami will show us the, kind of more of the advanced view.
Do you want me to show the other map that we had talked about earlier, the one that will be in blog 8? Do you want me to show that one here quick before you hop on that? Or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So someone had asked about other uses. So basically the part of it was before so in 7.2, we didn't have any integration with maps. So I had built a overlay so I could look at the maps data in Elastic Maps, not in the SIEM app. And again, this before the SIEM app had this. And you can add, like you can do the pew pew maps, but there's a lot more, I think there's scripted fields behind it. So it's a lot more work. But I basically could still get the point to the source and destination references here. And Zoom isn't letting me, oh, it is letting me. Good. But then again, I can get a kind of a better picture of where, traffic is going on in my environment. And then I have access obviously to the layers, either states and counties and just the other things. And you can add your own, if you do business, if you're a business and you do business with a certain company and you know where they're putting, you could set that in there, right? I mean, it's really customizable here. So, but in case anyone's interested, once you have that data in Elasticsearch, you obviously can do a lot more with it. So that will be, I'll cover that a little bit more in blog 8 whenever we get around to it. But with everything happening, COVID and all that, it just hasn't been on my priority list.
Yep, completely understand. And so this is what I'm doing is I'm sharing this RDP. This is that Windows VM that I was installing the WinLog beat. And this is kind of that screen here. But if we come back over, I'm gonna go ahead and go over to our SIEM dashboard. And this is all live, so we're playing with fire as always. So while this loads, here we go. I mean, I was gonna say I was gonna drop my video just for a little more bandwidth, but. So obviously, one of the things that we'll find is, we'll have some kind of holes in different areas where we're not seeing data. And that's just because we're not completely, building that out. So we really haven't built in the signal count or the alerting counting for as part of the definitions. So that's something that we haven't really gone over. And I'm going to move this maybe, and what we're doing is we're showing the last 24 hours of data. If we want to show it since I stood up the environment, we can expand that out. But we can kind of start to look at some different event counts or event data that's coming up. So, we have audit beat, which is coming from our CentOS machine. We can kind of see some different events that are coming up. File beat also, and WinLog beat. But one of the things I wanted to show that, if we come over to hosts, for example, it should list out our Windows machine and our CentOS machine. And it's funny because, we can see 9 failures. And what some of those failures are unsuccessful logins is what I did is I put on my environment, I did a virtual port forwarding and a NAT. And I asked some people within Elastic to say, hey, can you try to log in and, through root or through through this RDP session and see if we can try to get, some useful data out of that. Like, hey, where are this data, who's trying to log in and where are they coming from? Just to kind of give you some data. No good demos ever when something's going right. It's when something's going wrong. So you can kind of see where this failure of 9 failures at and some information there. But if I come over to my networking, one of the things that you'll see within my map, the differences between Rob's is Rob has enriched the data a little bit more through his blog series. So when we do part 2, this is something we'll continue to add on to get more data here. But you can see here,
and kind of on that, so if anyone's guessed, I do not live in New York, but since you can define your own private addresses, you can define where they are. So anyway, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, so you can see where, we had some folks that were in France and Germany and Australia, and that all attempted to try to log into my environments. And it's funny because we have one of our advocate managers in Australia. We have a couple advocates in France and Germany, and of course, all across the United States that was trying to log in and make some events. So, with the information that I did today, I installed these WinLog beats. I went through the YAML file, either through like a text editor or through Vi on a Synapse machine. And I added all the additional information in. It's something you can easily replace the longitude, latitude, and your information, and get some of this data into it. There was one little configuration that I did, and that was, which I'll show you in just a second, that made all of this network map possible. And again, it's just, I want to make sure I'm cognizant of time. No one wants to go over an hour and a half video or YouTube video. So a lot of this will actually go into the second part, a little bit more into details of, what's inside the SIEM app, what are some things that you can do, how can we enrich this data, how can we make it useful for not only as you being personal, as a personal solution, but also maybe for like an SMB solution. And again, this isn't just for SMB or personal. Obviously, there are very large organizations that have used Elastic and the SIEM and Endgame as a part of an enterprise solution. This is just the purpose of this virtual meetup is just to show, this free and open SIEM, the first from Elastic, and the first of its kind to be completely free and open. What can you do with it? So, but that's just the high level here. I do want to share one thing here real quick, and let me see here. So you'll notice here that the only thing that I added to is the output.elasticsearch.pipeline and then GeoIP info. That's the only thing that I had to add to get that additional information here. So I'll go ahead and add that. And then, of course, that password is also another old password, so don't worry about that. Cami, do you want to show just very briefly on the end piece of kind of just 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, I can do that. And just in the interest of time, I'll go really quick because we're pretty over.
Yeah, and Cami, if anyone in the chat has any questions or anything that maybe you want us to cover for next time, what we'll do is we'll stop the recording and then we'll kind of open it up to anyone that wants to talk or any questions or anything, or maybe, hey, I would love to see this in another virtual meetup on the security topic, and then we can talk about that. And yeah. So anyway, sorry, Cami.
No worries. Yeah, so I'm going to do a much more detailed demo in the next parts of this series, but I just wanted to just briefly show another environment where we have quite a lot of data coming in. This is what you would see if you stood this up for your small or medium-sized business, most likely. And again, it's a more interesting view just to see what's going on when you start really getting a lot of data in here. So this is your overview page. New in 7.6 is detections and signals. So you can see your signal count here. Signals are just events that are created by detection rules when they trigger. So I'll go into this in a lot more detail later as well. And George sort of showed these views already, but you have the host, network, detections, timelines. New in 7.6 is a cases view as well, not shown here, but we'll show that in another part of this series. One more feature I just want to show here on the left, the security news feed. This is a nice new feature as well, where you can set up your analysts with news that they'll need to see without having to leave the SIEM to go search for the latest current events. George already showed you the host view and the network view, but I'll just show you, what does this look like when you have 76,000 failures, for example, and several hosts to look at. Network as well gets a lot more interesting when you have a lot more data coming into your map. This takes just a second to load. But now you can see, we have hundreds of sources and destinations we can start digging into here. Again, there's a ton of data down here and different features that I'm going to go into in detail, types of network data, anomalies, which is machine learning. I'm going to go into that in more detail as well. And the timeline, which is really, in my opinion, one of the best features for a security analyst. I'm gonna show that as part of a security investigation, how you would start investigating, which is really beginner threat hunting. But you would just pop open the timeline here. You can start dragging and dropping data into the timeline directly, and it's going to start rendering data for you, which is really one of my favorite features of the SIEM. So that's just a really quick high-level overview. But again, I'm going to go into a lot more detail in other parts of the series. And George, do we want to go into any Q&A real quick?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is, well, so first I want to say thank you for everyone that spent the time out of their day to come out and listen to experts like Rob and Cami kind of go through this process and listening to me say all the ums and buts, and thank you for your time out of this. And again, we want to have 2 other series of virtual meetup series that will go deeper into what we built today, and then later, and then the 3rd part series is really go into more of a threat, understanding the threat analysis and what you can do within the SIEM. Again, thanks for coming. And I wanted to include how to get some help. Obviously, we have our Discuss forum, which is a great way to get your answers questions. When we can all meet together, community meetups is also a great opportunity to meet different people that are in your area and how you can share use cases. Of course, during this period of the pandemic, you can go visit our training. We're offering some free training online. So visit our training site. And of course, we have a Slack channel at elasticstack.slack.com if you have any questions. Thanks, and hopefully you enjoyed the presentation.